as a kid, anyone in the community that I guess would be people that brag about or something other than Lemuel Chenoweth. He was a very respected bridge builder and furniture maker, and I assumed he was an average bridge builder and furniture maker. People prided themselves if they could say, "Well, Lemuel built this house," or "He made that stand." You know, it seemed to be the always had the feeling that he was known. His abilities were such that people wanted to identify with him, and if they could pass something off as something he did, it might be worth a little bit more, that type of thing. And then in doing his house, I began to get a real appreciation for his work. I had a gentleman view that house that does a lot of restoration work with log cabins. Lemuel's house was what you call post and beam. Everything was pinned and mortised into framing, no nails. It was either wooden pins, and then the studs would be mortised in the beam that it was under it, and then the top beam would be set down on the top tendon, and that would hold it in place. Whereas a log structure would be just logs laid up. That work, as good as it was, and it appeared to be better than most of the homes I've seen. Whether he did such things as split the lath or not, but it seemed to be the hewing and everything. Things seemed to be amazingly precise. But then his windows, his panels under the windows, his craftsmanship was just superb. Well, this gentleman that I made mention of, he'd viewed the house, and there's some very unique stress features built in the house, incorporated in the construction of the house. And this gentleman observed that you could probably tell he was a bridge builder because of the way he built his house. He had stress features in the house that you normally wouldn't see in a home. You'd expect to see it maybe on a bridge or something like that. And there was some things like that incorporated in the house that I've never seen in any other house. Where he had his stairway going up from through where the ceiling would have been. Of course, the rafters couldn't go from one side to the other. They had to be cut off and then bridged. Well, in the wall we found this piece of iron pipe that came down from the ceiling and just curled in under the closest rafter to where it had been cut out. Well, if you'd go up in the attic, you'd see what you would maybe call a button. There was a wooden cross member up there with a nut and a washer on top of it. Well, if that would have appeared to be a little bit weak, all you'd have to do was tighten that nut up, and it would draw that ceiling joist up. Where'd you ever see something like that? I never had. On a porch, a second level porch where the posts come down and rested. Normally people maybe would toenail them in. Well, he had some banding metal about 18 inches long that went up on the porch, up on the post, down to the post, and then came on down to a big, maybe 8 by 10 beam, and then that was secured with screws at each end. Always said that if it ever be a tornado in Beverly, that'd probably be the last house to fall down. I was old enough to witness the bridge being blown up, and as a kid. 1953, I think it was. I would have been 12, and I know there's some dates kicked around from 52, 3 to 4. It could have been 54. But I was old enough to take some of the timbers, and that old dry yellow poplar really floated well. And then I took a couple 2x4s, about 4 feet long, and at each end I nailed them across, and then 3 flat boards right in the center, and made a raft. And those timbers were being gathered up by a number of people. Some of them enjoy them in their homes today. But I lived at Beverly at the time, about the equivalent of 2 town blocks down below the bridge, so I was able to stand at the end of the lot and watch what went on. But I remember I made that raft, and I took it down the river about a mile, where my grandfather had a farm that joined the riverbank. And then I pulled the raft up, and I put a chain around it and locked that chain. I believe it even had a lock on it. And I figured, well, at that point there was a hole that was about a 1/4 mile long. I figured now I could this summer I could pull that thing up and down all along that water hole there. And didn't work out because somebody took my bridge, or my raft. But if a little bit of water, you could pull the raft all the way to Elkins. The main concern was school buses crossing from the Georgetown Road over into Beverly. They would bring the bus up to the bridge. The kids would dismount. They'd drive the bus across the bridge, and they'd get back on. Well, that was when there were either 5 or 6 piers built under the bridge with props in them that was up propping the bridge, supposedly propping the bridge up. And the first thing they did, they stripped the bridge first. They took the gable roof off. They took the siding off. All that was left was the truss and the arches. I have a picture when the bridge was being built. I have a tintype of the bridge when it was being built in the same state of condition before they put the sides on and the arches on. And then I was able to obtain a color photograph of it when they were tearing it down in the same condition. It was it's pretty interesting photographs. But anyway, they'd do that, and then they thought it would be to where they could pull the arches, the props out, and it'd fall down. Well, they did that, but the bridge just refused to cooperate, so to speak. Of course, you got to realize this is an arch bridge. It's not just a series of trusses. It actually has an arch with abutments, stone abutments at both ends. The bridge, of course, didn't cooperate. They all knew it wouldn't, but it didn't cooperate anyway, so they decided to have dynamite one side. They thought they'd pick on the one they thought was the weakest. So everybody was all excited about watching them dynamite the bridge and expecting it to fall in. That was on the west side, I believe the lower corner. Well, they set their charge of dynamite, and nothing happened. Went off, and the bridge just refused to go down. So they decided they'd have to put another charge off. Well, by the second charge caused that end to drop in the water. And then they just got a big bulldozer down there and pulled with a winch the other end in, So that bridge would have stood any traffic that you could have. I don't think you could have had enough trucks loaded with stone crossing that bridge that would have caused it to fall in, even with the arches. I don't know if they were maybe ignorant of the function of the arch. I think they just wanted to get a new bridge built, satisfy people and that type of thing. If the same thing would have happened, been proposed today, it would have never happened, that they would have saved the bridge. You can see what they did when the Philippi Bridge burned. And the bridge that Lemuel built at Philippi, the bridge at Barrackville that Lemuel built, they just finished restoring that bridge. Some after they'd built a new bridge beside of it and left the old bridge stand, and now they've even gone in and restored the old bridge. So it would be safe to drive across even today. But back in the 1950s, there was little concern to save the bridge. Those that were concerned were vehemently concerned, a number of them were, that had the appreciation that they should have had for what they had. The thing that made it so appropriate to have saved that bridge was the road went down and forded the river about 150 feet above the bridge. There was a natural stone bottom there, and when the Stanton-Parkersburg Turnpike was built, that's where the road went. And if you were turning at Beverly to cross the river on the Stanton-Parkersburg Turnpike, you would have made a left at the bank corner and gone down across that natural ford, and it would have been a straight shot. So when he built the bridge, if you were coming from the west, he had to come up and make a sharp turn into it, turn away from that natural straight line. You had a perfectly good place to cross there. And they usually would build a temporary bridge anyway. I think in that instance, he only built a footbridge across. I don't remember of a temporary bridge. Oftentimes now they'll build a temporary bridge and then repair a bridge and then take out the temporary. But it was sad that bridge would have been lost as it was. But it wasn't the first bridge to be lost. But Lemuel Chenoweth set the standard for the construction of covered bridges. He just wasn't another builder of covered bridges. And he was the one that would build the big bridges. If there were no big bridges, he wasn't against building an open 60-foot bridge. But if there was a contract, it would be Lemuel Chenoweth that would usually build the big ones. 4 things that stand today that I think I would point to for the ability of Lemuel Chenoweth. One is his house. Fortunately it stands, and now it's restored the way it was when it was built in 1856. The Philippi Bridge, the Huttonsville Presbyterian Church, that's Gothic in architecture, and the thing more than anything else that probably stands as his ability would be a wooden scale model sawmill that is articulating. In other words, you turn a crank and everything functions. The saw works, the carriage advances, and everything like that, made out of wood. And in 1970s, I had opportunity to purchase that sawmill, which was very much disassembled in a box, and I, as tight as money was, I said, well, I'd known of Lemuel, and I said, well, I'll take a chance with that and see if it couldn't be assembled, and took it to an old fella that I worked at Miles Lumber Company that time. I was forester for Miles Lumber Company, and there was a fella by the name of Bill Simmons that had come there from over at Cass. He was a sawyer, and Morris Raines had come from over at Cass, and he was just the kind of like a mill manager at the mill for Miles Lumber Company, but he had an enormous amount of mill work. Didn't take them any time to figure out how to put that thing together. So we did, and if I was told I could have all the shop equipment, anything I wanted to smooth and plane and drill, I could never come close to the work craftsmanship that's in that little old sawmill. As the story goes, he whittled and cut a model and took it to Richmond in his saddlebags, and they had a gathering of bridge builders, and they were going to take bids or award these contracts to these bridge builders who was supposedly to assemble there. And Lemuel then appears at the end of the meeting and walks in and assembles his model, stretches it between two chairs, and stands on it. And he immediately got the contract for 5 bridges. That story has been repeated almost verbatim by some people that ought to knew better, and also maybe a little bit tentatively by people that would recognize that maybe they shouldn't state that as absolute fact. And it's true, Lemuel did make a model. He wrote an engineer in Petersburg, Virginia, civil engineer, telling him what he had. Evidently, the engineer had been in Beverly and seen it. Lemuel said, I'm going to make this model. I want to bring it down because I've learned of 2 bridges that are going to be offered, and they're big ones. And that was in 1850. The Beverly Bridge was built in 1847. The lady that said that Lemuel had gone down and did this, and then we got the contract for 5 bridges. All 5 of those were built. No. She said Hudsonville Bridge, which Lemuel didn't build. The Daly Bridge, which he did build, but that wasn't built till 1856. The Beverly Bridge, which he did build, but that was built 3 years before the letter was written. and the bridge at Middle Fork, I think that was 1854. I forget what the 5th bridge was. But all 5 bridges were on the Stanton-Parkersburg Turnpike. By the time that he had gone down there was only 1 or 2 more bridges to build on the Stanton-Parkersburg Turnpike. The contract that what he did, whether he took it down, and I believe he did take it down. I don't have any record that he arrived with it there, but he was telling this engineer he would bring it down. But the 2 bridges that was under consideration was going to be put up for bid was the Philippi Bridge and the bridge across the West Fork River at Fairmont. So the report was very much in error that she had as to the bridges. From the first bridge to the last bridge, there was almost a 10-year period. That contract would have dried up in 10 years, But there was hardly any time they ever awarded the Board of Public Works of the state of Virginia ever awarded a contract without taking bids on it. Now, whether he actually went in and put it down and between 2 chairs and stood on it, I don't know, and then said, well, here's all these great big number of bridge builders, which itself wasn't true, because I don't think he had oftentimes on a big bridge, he didn't have any competition. I couldn't find a bid submitted by anybody for the bridge on the Greenbrier River. So I personally think, yes, he built the model. He did take it to Richmond. Incidentally, the model was on a scale of 1/5 the letter says the model was on a scale of 1 inch to a foot on a 130-foot bridge. That would have meant that if it wasn't disassembled, it would have had to been 13 feet long to have gotten your saddle. And but he said with appropriate splices. And I'm sure he had as many splices as if it was a scale model of the bridge he would have assembled. He'd have had maybe a dozen splices or more for the arch, and would have had to assemble. Now he could have had he could have left them in sections of 3, but I think it's true. He built a model. He took it to Richmond. I question from there on what took place. I would say there were probably people in Virginia that could have built that bridge, but would they have wanted to come all of the way to Western Virginia? He had the reputation. By that time, the superintendents didn't mind the bridges being put up for bid, but if anybody got it from anybody got it other than Lemuel Chenoweth, and oftentimes it was Lemuel and his brother Eli, if anybody else got that bridge, they had problems. Because time and time and time again, somebody else would build the bridge. Guess who they got to come and fix it? I mean, I said when I started this, I had never been told. He just wasn't an ordinary bridge builder. He set the standard. And I mean, and when he built them to standard.